fiance,
Mhm.
family's got to be like at least 70 people minimum. Like that's just immediate family. So I was like, yeah, just
Yeah.
so many people. But
Hmm.
no, yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time. So I'm taking a full length tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
I'll Altius to full length too. And starting tomorrow, actually, I'm gonna be taking a full length every single um week,
Hmm.
literally. So that's the plan, and hopefully that really helps. I
Yep.
also I hammered out all like the world psychology in
Hmm.
1 week. Um, because yeah, like I've been consistently scoring low, and now I'm scoring better on the other sciences than psych. So I did that, and I finished all the Q packs. And so the plan is after I do this ALTIS exam and review it, to start doing the section bank volume two.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah,
Uh, on her on her neck, I have tritium.
tritium,
Tritium. Yep.
isn't that like a labeling thing?
Yep. Yep. First learned about it from Spider-Man 2, the Tobey Maguire one.
Why is it on the neck?
What's up?
You said you said there's tritium on the cat's neck?
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's hard to see, but it basically lights up or glows essentially forever. So that's something you also see in like exit signs and like on the sights of some guns, like because it just pretty much glows.
Hmm. Okay. Well, so anyways, yeah. I told you my plan.
Mhm.
And yeah, I wanted to just cover one of the passages um I sent to you.
Mhm. You can kind of see in this picture.
Yeah, but like barely, honestly.
Yeah, 'cause all right,
Yeah.
it like
Yep.
it lights up.
Hmm.
All right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, when he sent this, I was like, this looks like a physics passage of some sort.
Hmm.
Um, looks pretty complicated, but okay, let's see. I'll read it. So,
Hmm.
healthy kidneys function to excrete toxic metabolic byproducts and return needed substances to the bloodstream. Um, and that should make sense, right? Because in the kidneys, in like the nephron, you have things that get like through filtering the blood. Like the filtered stuff stays in the tubules and eventually gets excreted out through urine. But the things that don't get excreted out can be reabsorbed via the vasa recta, like the capillary system around the nephron. And if it gets reabsorbed, it goes back into the blood and back into circulation. So that's what they're saying here. Excrete the toxic metabolic byproduct and return through reabsorption, needed substances into the bloodstream. Um, Overall giving you a relatively constant blood plasma solute concentration. Okay. For people with chronic renal failure, hemodialysis is a life-sustaining procedure. Figure 1 shows features of an early hemodialysis unit design. Figure 2 shows a more recent improved hemodialysis unit. Okay, figure 1, it seems like, let's see, blood inflow from patients, and there's a pump. I'm guessing a pump is needed. to like force something to be moving in a certain direction, I guess, not through like diffusion, perhaps. Um, okay. Dialysis reservoir, dialysis membrane, dia dialysate fluid comes in through there, blood outflow to the patient. Okay. And then we have some pump there, and it goes to like some rectangle with two circles and eventually to a drain. So I guess the stuff you don't need. Um, okay.
So when like the mnemonic dump the hunk, which is like H plus, urea, NH3 plus, and K plus,
You said H plus urea.
is it NH3 nit or nitrate? Like what is I don't know what the N stands for, I forget.
This was what was that? Mnemonic or whatever?
I said it in the chat.
Hunk the hunk MCAT. All right, hydrogen, urea. The N, I guess, is the let's see, ammonia. Yep, NH3. K is your potassium. PCT dumps that. Okay.
Okay.
Hmm. Sorry. Um, so I guess this is stuff that the dump part, like, okay.
But doesn't I don't think yeah, I
Is
mean
that the reabsorption or yeah, right? Or excretion?
that's my question. Like wh- when they say that, like what does it mean? Like is the PCT reabsorbing that and later getting rid of it, or it just right away gets like rid of it?
Let's see. I mean, I see like different.
It's fine. We don't have to spend like much time on it,
Sure.
but
Like I'm
yeah.
seeing a Reddit thread that says it's not the most accurate mnemonic for the PCT. Um, the primary role of PCT is reabsorption.
Okay.
Um, and then there's like an image to a diagram of the nephron, and it seems like at the PCT you have bicarbonate ion leaving the tubule, and if it leaves the tubule, it means it's not going to be in the filtrate, but it'll be reabsorbed. I see sodium chloride also leaving through active transport. I see H plus entering into the PCT. I see H2O leaving through passive transport. I see nutrients leaving through active transport. I see ammonia entering through passive transport, and I see potassium exiting, meaning reabsorption, on the PCT. So that's a like kind of different stuff for each of these. But yeah, okay. Let's see. Improved hemodialysis unit, blood inflow pump, multiple dialysis membranes, blood outflow to patient, diastolate fluid entering in from like the left, and it goes through, and then there's a pump, and then something to the drain again. Don't really know. All right, whatever. blood from the patient is pumped through a dialysis filter, which is bathed in dialysate fluid that is continuously pumped out of the dialyzing chamber. Okay, I guess that means this is then pumped out that way, right?
If you're drawing, I can't see it.
Oh, that's weird.
Oh yeah, I see now.
Okay. Yeah, so I drew like diastolate fluid going up and then right and then down and then eventually to the drain. So I think that's, well, yeah, that's the diastolate fluid that's continuously pumped out of the dialyzing chamber. Okay. After passing through the dialyzing chamber, the blood is returned to the patient. Okay. The dialysis membrane is made of a thin, semi-porous material, which allows the diffusion of solutes with molecular weights up to 1,000 to 2,000 Daltons, depending on the size of the membrane pores. Protein molecules are too large to diffuse through the membrane. After the solutes have passed through the membrane, they are washed away in the dialysate fluid. Excess fluid and waste products are thus removed from the patient's bloodstream. Table 1 lists concentrations of various solutes in normal plasma, in plasma from a typical renal failure patient before dialysis, and the range of solute concentrations used in dialysate solutions. Okay. Um, Sodium, normal plasma, renal failure seems to be roughly the same. Um, dialysate range is between the normal plasma amount for high and I guess like 10 lower than renal failure for low. Chloride 100 and then 92, and then low is 95, high is 110. Potassium 4 and 5, low 1, high 2. Bicarbonate 24 and then 18, and then a low which seems to be higher than either, and then high it's a little bit higher. Urea nitrogen. Oh, I see. So I guess this can help us because if the normal plasma has a larger amount of sodium than one undergoing renal failure, that means that this sodium, I believe, should be reabsorbed. And if your kidneys are messed up, you have a small amount of it perhaps reabsorbed. Um, Chloride goes down as well. Potassium goes up if you have renal failure. So that might mean that potassium is supposed to leave.
Yep.
Bicarbonate entering in. Oh, and then this should be consistent with that picture I saw. Let me see. Potassium exiting. Okay. Bicarbonate also exiting. So that's why. Oh, wait. Okay.
No, bicarbonate is kept on
Okay.
technically according to this graph, but
Uh-huh.
I think from past studying, um, NaCl and bicarbonate, yeah, they're reabsorbed, but K plus and H plus leave.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
K plus and H plus leave. Yeah, that's why the solution pH here, maybe that's why it's lower. There's just more H plus when there's renal failure, because normally H is supposed to leave.
so I guess, okay, if the renal failure value is larger than the normal plasma value, there's too much being reabsorbed, I think, right? And if it's smaller, too much is being excreted, perhaps. Um, okay. let's see. And then solution pH is just slightly lower, which I guess can tell us about H plus concentration then, right?
Mhm.
So renal failure, higher H plus concentration. No value for dialysate range, for urea, nitrogen, and creatine, cre,
Creatinine.
yeah, creatinine. Okay. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna try the questions though. So, okay, osmotic concentrations of plasma proteins in the venous side capillaries help reduce the amount of interstitial fluid in the tissues by inducing. So, this is what I want to ask you. So, like when you have capillaries, right? Like there is one side basically has like a higher osmotic pressure than the other side, and I'm not sure about how that works.
Um, so let's see. There's hydrostatic pressure and there's osmotic pressure. And hydrostatic pressure is like a pushing kind of pressure, which is typically how we think about pressure anyway. And it's like the pressure of the blood or the fluid that is exerted onto things around it. So that's a hydrostatic pressure. And osmotic pressure is more of like a sucking
Yep.
type of pressure.
Yeah.
So as you go from artery to vein, you have hydrostatic pressure decrease and osmotic pressure increase.
So
And yep.
you have vein, right? So you're saying hydrostatic increases?
Oh, sorry. So as you go from, so like the hydrostatic pressure is like the pressure of the blood pushing against like a blood vessel. That's going to be higher in arteries because we know that, the blood pressure in an artery is really, really high.
Yeah.
And it will start to decrease as you go from artery to capillary and then continue to um, decrease. So we can maybe write it like, let's see, like usually, okay. Usually I see it as kind of like this diagonal. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. And so basically, let's see, something like here, I'll kind of draw it. So we have, I'll just say red, oops, and then blue for the veins, and your let's see, say pressure on this y-axis, and this diagonal is going to be your blood pressure, in other words, hydrostatic, and it goes down. Do this a little bit better.
Yeah. I was confused. Are you
Kind of
like
like this.
wait? Is this like a graph? Like,
Yeah. So, um, okay, so check this out. So like in your glomerulus, uh, and the Bowman's capsule, so the glomerulus is like your, I guess your capillaries that press up against the Bowman's capsule and pushes blood through the Bowman's capsule, causing it to get filtered. And it's the blood, and it's your blood pressure, your hydrostatic pressure that pushes against that filter, causing filtration to happen. And filtration means that you're going from the blood to like the nephron's tubule system.
mhm.
So we can say this is filtration that occurs. Um, Meaning, yeah, things are moving from the blood to like the tubules of the nephron. Now, as we get so like right at the capillaries is where this kind of like, over here, like this kind of like center line that is kind of like zero almost on this y-axis of pressure. Um, Once you go past that, we start to see increasing amounts of pressure. But this is the sucking kind of pressure, aka the osmotic pressure. So here I'll write like, okay, so here this is blood in parentheses, hydrostatic pressure. I'm going to put in also in parentheses pushing. And here I'll put um osmotic pressure, sucking. Um and then this would cause reabsorption back into the bloodstream. So, um, so yeah, as we go for, so yeah, the arteries have high blood or hydrostatic pressure that pushes against, the walls of the artery. But in particular, at the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule, the blood pressure pushes against the filter, causing, the blood to be filtered. And when it's filtered, it enters into the tube system of the nephron. And as you go from artery to capillary, the amount of that hydrostatic blood pressure decreases and starts to turn into an osmotic pressure, which is less of a pushing and more of like a sucking. And that causes the opposite of filtration, which is reabsorption, which means back into the bloodstream from like the kidney's tubule system.
um, but how does this connect to like? Because I understand that like with the glomerulus or whatever, like yeah, the afferent arteriole or artery, like they as if you increase blood pressure, stuff gets filtered out quickly. It's a bigger GFR, and like I get that, but how does that relate to the veins?
What's GFR?
Glomerular filtration rate.
Got it. What were you saying about it?
Like, how does that relate to the veins? Because I'm still trying to piece it all together.
Hmm.
Like where is this even happening? This is happening in what the cat like because there's also supposed to be capillaries in the middle of these two, right? Technically.
Yeah.
Um, but where's this happening? Like, isn't this happening at tissues? In tissues, not in kidneys? You know?
Oh no. So this is happening in the kidneys. So so like here. Bowman's capsule, glomerulus. So here is where the blood pressure pushes through this glomerulus to the Bowman's capsule, and that's where you have this maximum filtration happening, which
Hmm.
causes things to get into the tube system. Um, and also, this is your uh, cortex of your kidney and
Yeah, medulla.
your medulla. And as you go down, the amount of solute concentration goes up, which means osmotic pressure goes up as you go deeper into the nephron, deeper into the medulla,
Okay.
right? So what that means is, so yes, so first we have filtration happening here from the blood entering into the filtrate of the blood is entering into the into the Bowman's capsule, and then in the proximal convoluted tubule here, you have mostly um, reabsorption, which is due to an osmotic pressure. And that's pretty much like the two things that can happen here. Because what I didn't draw, because it's going to look messy, is that the nephron tubules are completely surrounded by this capillary network called the vasa recta. So if things are leaving something like the PCT, um, it means it's getting reabsorbed and going back into the bloodstream. Whereas if things were entering, it's getting filtered, exiting out of the bloodstream and into this tubule system, which eventually goes out as urine.
Okay, so like, are you saying that it's surrounded by veins and arteries?
More like capillaries, but yeah.
Well, when you say capillaries, like, aren't those connected to both veins and arteries?
Mhm. Yeah. Uh, ultimately connected to that stuff, but you know, veins and arteries, they have thicker walls, so there isn't like much exchange happening there. Whereas capillaries, they're like a single like red blood cell like thick. So gas exchange like in the lungs can happen, and also, things can get reabsorbed directly into the capillaries. So that's why it's a capillary network.
What does the PCT like? What does the PCT absorb exactly? Does it like absorb bad stuff as well?
Well, when you say absorb, tell me.
Like, because you're saying things get reabsorbed into the PCT.
Um, so so when you say into the PCT, like
Like stuff is getting reabsorbed at the PCT is what I'm saying. And what is it?
or
Like,
back into the blood.
yeah, back into the blood. Like, what is it? I know, is glucose one of those things? Like,
So I
is,
found an image here that can help us out.
if I share it, the drawings are gonna close.
Uh,
I remember, yeah. So yeah, because I'm pretty sure I'm sharing window.
yeah, it's okay.
But okay, I'm
Yeah.
looking at it.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that shows that the stuff that leaves the PCT, for example, is
Mm-hmm.
tubular reabsorption, which means it leaves the tubules, enters into the vasa recta, aka reabsorbed into the bloodstream.
Yep.
And the pink is tubular secretion, which means it's exiting the blood and entering into the tubules to ultimately leave as pee.
Right.
So it seems like um so I guess the hump, the dunk or whatever, dump the
Hmm.
hunk thing is it's not really help it's because I guess dumping sounds like you're leap like they're doing different things. The H plus is being secreted, the urea is being secreted, the ammonia is wait.
Yeah, here it's also NH4 plus versus NH3 because those are two different things, you know.
Well, I see also
But
urea in both sides. What's up with that?
right.
Um, let's see. And then the potassium is leaving, meaning getting reabsorbed. So, okay. So let's have as our takeaway that the PCT is going to do more. Okay, I know how to. Well, wait.
I mean, I think if anything, these are just really nuanced things that like I don't think the MCAT's gonna ask like specifically what PCT is gonna absorb, but
Oh, so let's do this, right? PCT, as you can see, does a lot more reabsorption than filtrate or secretion, right?
Mhm.
And the things that we see reabsorbed seems to be kind of important stuff, like glucose, amino acids, protein, lactate. Like these are all things essential for metabolic processes, right?
Yeah.
So that stuff is important, so that gets reabsorbed. And basically the stuff that is not important, like those byproducts and stuff, is going to get secreted, which means enters into the tubule system. And the tubule system eventually leaves the body as pee, as urine. So important stuff tend to be reabsorbed. Less important stuff tend to be filtered out.
Hmm.
Okay. So although we see urea like both in the pink at the PCT and in the blue for the PCT, urea ultimately is a uh, byproduct that you don't need, that's a waste product. So we're typically going to have urea being something that leaves
Hmm.
more so than is reabsorbed. Um, and I believe ammonia. I mean, we see it as the ammonium ion. Um, but like that's also a waste product, so that's gonna leave. So that's kind of like what we see here. So,
Okay.
all right. So,
Let's move on to the question. So, osmotic concentration of plasma proteins in the venous side of capillaries helps reduce the amount of interstitial fluid in tissues by inducing
okay. So,
the osmotic concentration of plasma proteins, venous side, okay, of capillaries. There's reabsorption happening. Um, Passive diffusion along concentration gradient, passive ion diffusion along an electrochemical gradient. I would eliminate B.
okay. Why?
Um, I think electrochemical gradient, that refers more to something like mitochondria.
Okay. So, electrochemical gradient is essentially talking about, um, like some type of electric, like a voltage difference.
Hmm.
That's kind of like in a neuron, for instance, right?
Okay.
Electrochemical cell, right? Whereas concentration gradient is concentration gradient, I guess. Okay, continue with your analysis.
C is facilitated ion transport along an electrochemical gradient. Okay, again. Um, And facilitate, I don't think there's anything to facilitate here. Um, uh,
What does it mean to be like facilitated?
that there's like a protein channel.
Okay. Ultimately, does it fall under closer to diffusion or active transport?
Um, Diffusion.
Hmm. Good. So ultimately, we're talking about like diffusion or active transport, which is completely dependent on concentration gradient, right?
Yeah.
Not an electrochemical gradient. So that could be a way of eliminating B and C, perhaps. Um, let's think a bit more about what they're saying in the question stem. They're saying that the osmotic concentration of plasma proteins in the venous side of capillaries. On the venous side, based on this drawing that I made, um, what uh, what can you tell me happens, I guess?
Water's going from high to low.
Um, okay, okay. Tell me, you know, I guess so. Okay, tell me like how do you how did you come to that?
It follows um salts that are going into the blood.
Okay.
So, and
So is the osmotic concentration of plasma proteins larger in the um, arterial side or the venous side?
I mean, if it's following it into the interstitial space, well, hold on. Actually, well, it's asking reduces the amount of interstitial fluid. So that means in the vein there's more salt,
Okay. So,
which
yep.
yeah, I mean that the water's gonna diffuse into the vein.
Okay. So they're telling us that this gradient, or rather, we have a higher amount of, I guess we can consider the plasma proteins as solutes. Higher amount of solute means higher osmotic pressure. And we know on the venous side, there's a larger osmotic pressure than the hydrostatic pressure. Whereas on the arterial side, we have a higher hydrostatic pressure than osmotic pressure, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're saying that this higher concentration of solutes in the venous side helps reduce the amount of fluid in tissues. Meaning, and so, and then what's like the mechanism by which this happens?
Well, as I said, there's more salts in the vein than in the water's diffusing from the interstitial fluid, from the interstitial space into the tissues. That's
Mhm.
my guess.
Yep. So, okay, we can get rid of B and C because in addition to the electrochemical gradient not being a thing here, ion diffusion or ion transport also not a thing here. Or not something that affects, the amount of interstitial fluid, so doesn't answer our question. So now it's between A and D.
Right, I'll put A
Okay, why?
because as I said, it's a passive. Like the water's falling the solutes.
Hmm. Yep. So if you have a higher solute concentration, you must have a lower water concentration, right? And hence osmosis, which is, you know, uh, high water concentration to low water concentration.
Yeah.
Means low solute concentration to high solute concentration.
Capillaries in the kidney and elsewhere in the body maintain fluid homeostasis by balancing hydrostatic and osmotic pressures. Which of the following is the initial effect of a blood clot forming on the venous side of a capillary bed? So, blood clot is on the venous side. That's where there's higher osmotic pressure. Um, but it's taking up space.
So in this in-between region here, that's where your capillary is, and
Yeah.
that's where hydrostatic pressure is equal to osmotic pressure, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and which is the initial effect of a blood clot forming on the venous side of a capillary bed. If there's a blood clot, that means that there should, let's see, there should be like, all right, there's an obstruction that should mess with the flow, volumetric flow, right? Blood clot. Um, yeah. So okay, if there's like a blood clot here, seems like it's going to impede flow of the blood um from the artery or yeah, from the artery to the capillaries and then to the vein. So we should have a buildup here, and which I guess means a higher osmotic pressure, which means more
You mean
fluid.
higher hydrostatic pressure?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, yeah, I was thinking A.
Let's see. In the direction of interspace. Yeah, fluids will leave into and go into that interstitial space. Yep, that makes sense.
Why isn't it C or D though?
We're not changing the amount of solutes. Osmotic pressure, if you remember that,
Hmm.
one of the colligative properties, and that so pi is the osmotic pressure, and it's dependent on the concentration as well as like the Van Hoff factor, but number of solutes essentially. Osmotic pressure is dependent on the number of solutes. So uh, we don't have a change in the number of solutes. So osmotic pressure should not change.
Okay.
Mhm.
Which of the following changes in flow rate or in solute concentrations would not occur if the blood inflow rate was increased? Increasing the pressure in the dialysis chamber. Um,
The blood inflow rate were increased. That would kind of be like, I guess, on the arterial side, increasing pressure in the dialysis chamber. And what would not occur, the blood volume.
I think this would happen.
Yeah, because the flow rate is that volumetric flow, movement of a volume of blood per unit time. Um, if you increase the pressure, the blood pressure essentially, it should cause a higher flow rate, I guess, right?
A and D
Sorry,
would,
higher flow rate would cause a higher, yeah, that's exactly like what I guess flow rate means. It's a volumetric flow. So the blood volume reading the outflow to per unit time would increase. That should happen. Yeah. Um, right.
yeah. I mean, I think A and D happen. It's between B and C.
Filtration rate across the dialysis membrane would increase because I guess that is dependent on the hydrostatic or blood pressure. Okay. And then you said between B and C, osmotic.
Yeah.
Okay, they're both talking about okay. Osmotic concentration of proteins in the dialysis fluid would increase, or the osmotic concentration of proteins in the blood outflow would increase or remain unchanged. Diastolate fluid seems to be entering.
No, 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 no. Wait. Yeah, yeah, like this. The Yeah, like there's the diastolic fluid that enters and blood inflow enters from a different side. Um,
Let me see the left side of the, let me see the passage, bottom. Okay, if we're changing the flow rate of the blood and thus increasing the pressure, um, we should see, let's see. So, okay, we should see A, we should see D, and then osmotic concentration of proteins in the blood outflow would increase or remain unchanged. If the hydrostatic pressure increases and the osmotic pressure is supposed to be like the opposite of that, I would imagine that to either increase as well or I guess remain unchanged. But the dialysate fluid seems like it's something that is like a foreign thing that you're kind of throwing in there that's not going to be related to this thing here.
mhm.
Seems like the diastolate fluid is whatever it is, you know? Um, that would be my guess, I guess.
Okay.
Would increase.
This answer is assuming proteins can cross a semi-permeable membrane, which is untrue. The author says protein molecules are too large to diffuse through the membrane in the passage itself. Protein molecules are too large to diffuse through the membrane.
Protein molecules are too large to diffuse through the membrane. And this is saying the osmotic concentration of the proteins in the dialysate fluid would increase, but apparently the membrane for it does not allow proteins to pass through it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, B is saying that you're having a larger amount of proteins.
Bicarbonate ions in the blood and the diastole are important for maintaining physiological levels of.
Hmm. Okay. I think you could do this one.
Um, I mean, I know it relates to the bicarbonate maybe buffer system. Um, so question here though is water and hydrogen ions are both in. the bicarbonate buffer system, but
What
um,
uh what is the chemical formula for bicarbonate?
HCO3 minus.
Okay. So what does it want to do?
Combined with H, it can form H2CO3, which is carbonic acid, and that can dissociate into CO2 and H2O.
Uh-huh.
Um, but that's my thing. Like, I don't know, because the hydrogen and water are both in the equation, but it does combine with H plus.
Uh-huh.
So my guess is C.
Yeah, now if we look at this table, so bicarbonate and pH. So it seems like if we lower the pH, we would have an increase in H plus, and H plus plus HCO3 minus would give us your carbonic acid, meaning less bicarbonate. So we can see if you have less bicarbonate, you have a lower pH, which means a higher amount of H plus. So H plus will reduce the amount of bicarbonate, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, that's what it's gonna change. Mhm. So you also want to think, okay, if we want to, if we have an ion, how can we deal with it? You'd have to give it another ion, like an
Mhm.
oppositely charged ion,
Mhm.
right? So water doesn't have that. Chloride would be a negative charge, and bicarbonate is already negatively charged. That won't work. But yeah, hydrogen ions. Are high concentrations of sodium included in the dialysates? Um, okay. Um, let's see table one. Okay. Low, high, sodium. In the dialysates, why are high concentrations of sodium included in the dialysate? Induce water movement, maintain high osmotic pressure, maintain isotonicity. What's that, by the way?
When it's like an equal amount of solute
Uh-huh.
on both like sides or whatever. Isn't A and B basically saying the same thing?
I guess they would have, well, so I guess if you start off with a high osmotic pressure, it could cause water to move from the blood into the dialysate fluid. But when that happens, it will do that and equilibrate that osmotic pressure. So related, but not exactly the same, right? At least it, but yeah, very similar. Um, hmm. I don't think it'll be D because those things are not ions.
Yeah.
And I guess, yeah, A and B are pretty similar, and then isotonicity of the diastolate fluid. Why did they, okay, so it's asking us why did they, okay, I guess, so they're asking, I guess, why did they use high values here? Well, there's already high values here, and if you don't want there to be like movement of water or, sodium or any of that stuff, that would make sense, I guess. And I think that's what the diastolate fluid does for all of this stuff for the most part. I mean, well, bicarbonate's kind of different. Potassium's on the lower end. But chloride seems like it's somewhat within that range. So yeah, I think the diastolate fluid is like yeah, to make it isotonic perhaps. So you don't have like any major change in the concentration of this stuff. Oh, okay, cool. I mean, I can erase this if you want.
Okay.
All right, yeah. So I guess it's saying that it's roughly equal to that of normal plasma. Okay, so I guess that's what we compare it to. Okay,
Mhm.
got it. Mhm. Solute filtration rates, MEQ over ML. Okay. As a function of molecular weight for two dialysis. Okay, I mean, if it's a higher weight, wouldn't, okay, let's see. I mean, okay, wait, if it's, wait, membrane, okay. Membrane one with large pores, membrane two with small pores. Um, oh, why'd you get rid of,
Well, if one has large pores, right, that means that it can filter larger pores, it can filter more weight, right?
mhm,
That was my reasoning right
got,
away.
wait, oh, I see. So you want, yeah, it makes sense for membrane one to be to the right,
Right.
membrane two.
Yeah.
Um, Now, between B and D, what's the major difference here?
Um, the rate. Like the higher the weight, would it be a faster rate or a slower rate? That's the difference.
Hmm. Yeah, what do you think?
I think the higher the weight, the slower the rate.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. So D.
Hmm.
Okay.
Got it.
Nice.
Oh, cool. So yeah, we didn't really have to even know like what the hell figure one, figure two, or
Yeah.
then saw you concentration there wasn't pushed on. But okay, yeah, that
Okay.
was fun. Right. Awesome. So oh yeah, so I guess yeah, tomorrow you're taking your test and
Yeah. Next time I'm seeing you is in a week though. 6 to 8.
yeah, on
So
awesome. Okay. Good luck tomorrow and have a good weekend and you
I will see you next. Okay.